lies and used fake papers to get an interview with my mother, which they then made very public. And lies about the royal family, which fed her fears and made her more paranoid. Behind the walls of the palace, one choice has changed the course of royal history. This started out as a word about for Prince Harry, money has now become a scary fact of life. Sources say Meghan's most recent move caused no one was ready for the property freeze that happened, so Prince William had to speak up and confirm something even more important. Not calming. Princess Diana is said to have warned of a future like this a long time ago. So, was it just a chance, a calculated move, or was fate playing out right in front of our eyes as though the government is about to make the most dangerous turn yet? Passing on the ice. In a first of its, it has shocked the royal family and people outside of it that Prince Harry is getting money from his late father. The body of Princess Diana, her mother, has been frozen. The news was released precise language, and the law wasn't an answer to public rumors or tabloids' chaos or any unresolved psychological issues. Instead, it shows a choice made on purpose by the palace based on law, tradition, and the protecting the heritage that Diana worked hard to build. Before the 17th of January, 2026 dawn, high-level officials at Clarence House softly but firmly agreed to suspend all trust money that was given to the Duke of Sussex and people who rely on him. That which makes this action so unique is the reason for it. For the first time in history, a clause in Princess Diana's trust that had been inert for a long time, a rule that was made to protect the purity of her bloodline, has been turned on. Palace insiders say that this move was not made without much thought. It was set off. New information about Meghan Markle that brought up unanswered. There were concerns about the recipients' family trees and their ability to follow the rules Diana herself had set many years ago. To put it another way, the house did not act out of shame or assumption, but because the law requires it. An official statement that was read under the "There was no room for confusion when Prince William was in charge." As a safety step, this was a safety measure put in place to protect the estate and Diana's wishes. It was clear that it wasn't a punishment for Harry, Meghan, or anyone else. Still, in the language of power, and the effects are huge. When the phrase is used, it sends a clear message. This isn't just a protest that needs to be handled quietly behind closed doors. It's an issue with the structure that goes right to the heart of the future of the royal family and the carrying on of Diana's carefully chosen heritage. Royal watchers say that the phrase itself is clear and firm. It's not worried about behavior, image, or what other people think. What it's only for is to make sure that biology and the law are clear. There can be no legacy until the new questions are fully answered. No trusts can be given out, and no assumptions can be made about who is entitled to what. This court case changes something that might have seemed private or personal into something that could have long-lasting effects, change how the House of Windsor handles succession, openness, and the preservation of its most important traditions. Harry's fortune has been frozen, which is a rare moment of unity and power within the monarchy that had never been seen before. Just to tell you, even in the modern world, law, custom, and foresight are all linked in ways that can change people's lives quickly. It was said by the palace. The trust has been locked down, and the questions still remain. What will the Duke say? And what secrets might still be hiding in the dark of the past? Because of his wife's possible family problems, Prince Harry can't get his fortune from his mother. But why was Harry unable to get in? Is the palace just punishing him for leaving from your family? Another possibility is that Diana herself is behind this. Let's find out. A threat finally came true. The quick stop made that the property issue can be traced back to a strange legal device called Clause 3, which is deep inside Princess Diana's seal. Will believe. This phrase was never meant to police behavior, keep an eye on public image, or get rid of gossip. It's really about something much bigger: bloodline confidence at its core. Clause 3 only has one goal, which is to limit who can access the trust unless they can prove they are related to Diana's boys biologically. Be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, especially when family history is at stake. The section sat there for decades. Untouched, almost forgotten, and seen by royal lawyers as a very unlikely event instead of an active safety measure. Now that it's been turned on, things have changed. By letting Clause 3 go into effect, Prince William has admitted that Diana's long-ignored worry was not a poetic not out of fear or gut feelings, but as a planned legal protection for just this moment. Royal archaeologists have since revealed that Diana personally asked for this clause to be added in the mid-1990s during a time when she didn't trust royal systems as much, but her senses as amateur had become sharper. She was said to have been afraid that her youngest son might one day be open to betrayal that isn't cruel, but to confusion caused by silence and secret. With questions still unanswered. She was afraid that if the truth was kept from her for too long, could turn into a weapon even if it wasn't used on purpose. After the trust was set up, Section 3 inches a quiet way as maternal insight, a worry that was understandable request from a mum who was under a lot of stress. No one thought it would be used. No one made plans for the future. That biological proof would be needed to get what was supposed to be an inheritance. That time has now come. Arrived. By activating the clause, William has changed Diana's private life. Turning a warning into a law that can be enforced. The trust does not charge, guess, or assume anything doing wrong. It stops for a moment. It needs confirmation before going ahead. Until that proof exists, access to the property is still blocked, left alone and unmovable. The freeze is not a punishment in and of itself. It's a stop in the process, a legal breath held while waiting for clarity. Still, it has very important effects. A paper that was once sealed to keep it safe has become a public sign that questions that were once avoided can't be put off any longer. By following Clause 3, William has picked certainty over feeling and order over silence. He let it happen, his mother's quiet fear to come out of the darkness and do exactly what she wanted. And until the truth comes out, the inheritance is still locked up, but not because of suspicion, but because of a sentence that was written down. A mother decided many years ago that the truth, whenever it came, would finally matter. It serves to tell us that it's true that time doesn't erase open questions, even in the life of a king or queen, not only through wealth but also through the guts to face problems that history leaves unsolved. Behind. When the phrase "in Diana's will" was made public, Harry's inheritance was frozen. Possible. But why did the royal family use this clause? What is the how? Do the law see Diana's actions? Let's look at how English law gave allow Princess Diana to choose how she wants to be remembered. Built-in power. English language. By law, Princess Diana had a lot of power over what would happen to her estate after she died. This power, because of the freedom guaranteed by the Constitution, she had the legal right to choose who would get her money and how. When and how it will happen. She could make rules, put time limits on things, or even leave people out completely if she thought it was important. In the UK and Wales, the law doesn't put many limits on these kinds of decisions. Instead, it lets people use their own judgment to make the laws. In other parts of the UK, the rules are very strict, so this freedom is very different. Such as in Scotland, close no matter what the deceased person wanted, family members are promised a share of the estate. The English and Welsh give no such built-in safety measures. That's where a will shows what its mind is like. Make her almost without any help. What this meant for Diana was that her wealth was not just money, but also a tool she could carefully shape to keep her safe. Plans for a long time after she was gone. Diana was, because of this formal fact, she has every right to add protections to her trust. These weren't emotional moves or warning signs. They were lawful systems that were made with purpose and thought. She might ask for proof, ask for confirmation, or stop release if certain conditions aren't met. The law let her expect out and make plans for it without having to say sorry. Clause 3 came from this area of freedom. It wasn't separate from the law, and it didn't try to break it. It was carefully put together, true in every way, and strongly based on Diana's power in the law. Some people might find it strange, but it wasn't extreme in the wrong way. A lot of trusts have clauses that keep beneficiaries from getting their money until they hit a certain age, meet certain conditions, or pass certain checks. Diana's clause was only about the certainty of lineage, which is a legal issue. What's interesting about Clause 3 is not that it's legal, but what it's supposed to do. Diana knew that having a lot of money doesn't always make things easier. She thought that inheritance ought to stick to truth, not guess. The phrase was meant to make things take longer. Down, not to blame or accuse. It made room for clarity before access, making sure that the information that was passed on was sound. Not at all being forced. Clause 3 was not suggested by any advisors or royal lawyers. Diana made it herself. It showed how well she knew the system and how determined she was to use it wisely. She wasn't careless with her freedom. She was clear. With care, each element was put in place. Every the word was picked to protect rather than anger. In the end, Section 3 did not at all unusual. It was what happened because a woman carefully and fully used her legal rights. English Diana had the power to shape her reputation through the law, and she used it with purpose, foresight, and determination. Are there things besides the law that make this move more likely? What other parts do you think buttress Section 3? Allow us to now read the letter from the past. Diana's threat comes up again. What? No amount of public pressure or gossip was enough to get the crown to act. It was a piece of paper written in Diana's own handwriting. Hand. It was an open and honest letter written in the summer of 1996. And kept secret for many years by Paul Burrell, her former butler, the letter was written during a normal but extremely in-depth review of royal inheritances. Came back. Everything changed when it came back. She didn't write like a princess in that letter. She wrote as a mother who knew bad things were coming. It had a calm tone, but tense and worried in a way that comes from gut feelings rather than facts. She talked about taking care of her sons not from enemies but from lies, confusion, and facts that were left out, not said for too long. She was afraid that charm and quiet could hide her doubts. Might one day be worse than lies. Diana wrote about a meeting in the letter that made her think. She met a blind Tibetan mystic while traveling for charity work. The meeting was short but very disturbing. Diana says that the mystic talked about futures shaped by secret differences, of bloodlines being split up and crowns being weakened from the inside, and the truth wasn't told until it was too late. The warning wasn't very loud or exciting. It was said softly, almost kindly, that made it tougher to forget. Diana said she didn't fully understand the text message at the time. She still felt like she had to record it. At the end she wrote a short verse in her own careful handwriting and put it in the letter. For a long time, that rhyme was written as reflective poetry, the kind of symbolic poetry Diana often wrote to deal with her fear and hope. No one thought it was meant to help make policy or law. That belief is no longer true. When lawyers say when they looked at the letter again, they saw that the line had been copied almost word for word into the symbolic language of sentence 3. What used to sound magical now reads like a list of steps. Each line led to more time, checks, and the idea that the truth might need to safety until it was time to come out. Diana hadn't been guessing after all, the letter showed. She had been making plans. It became clear to her that the most dangerous threats aren't always loud or mean. At times, they come in quietly, wrapped up in kindness and grace. It wasn't scandal that scared her, but not knowing what would happen next was passed down like a family member. Now that the letter has been verified and accepted, that it was no longer possible for the Crown to use Section 3 as a sign, Diana thought that the truth would not come out on its own in the future. She thought it would sleep, hidden, and it stayed hidden until someone was brave enough to bring it to light. At that time has arrived, changing a private letter into a quiet force that changes the course of history, in the royal story about responsibility and what it means to inherit something today. Now also, besides Clause 3 of her will, Princess Diana had a letter made to back up what she wants. Where does this phrase fit in now, though? Meghan might be linked to what Diana was most afraid of. Let's look into how one quiet claim time to the past woke up a phrase that was sleeping. A claim that made the throne shake. No one saw this person coming, they were at the center of the problem. She was neither a princess nor a court jester, and not a famous person. She was an American woman who was 29 years old and was known in court records only as AM. Her name had never been used before that showed up in palace records or in public discussion. Still, her cool arrival would change everything in a quiet way. AM did not show up angry or as a show. She took her time, was careful, and was exact. In this made-up story, she said she was Meghan Markle's real daughter, a claim that was taken seriously right away. Wait, that explodes. The date she said she was born, July 1996, her life took place at a very specific time, a time of change. Between being a child and an adult, or between the end of one stage of life and the start of another. Just the times made it necessary. Pay attention. It wasn't drama that made it impossible to avoid her, but information. AM brought oaths, papers that had been notarized, and a trail of the paperwork was made with almost scientific care. She showed a DNA test. Data looked over by a well-known and respected geneticist who testified in the story that there was a 99% chance that she was related to the Markle the family tree. The proof wasn't put out there to make headlines, but so it could stand up to close examination. Oddly enough, I'm not being asked for anything that normally leads to such revelations. She did not try to get money. She didn't make any claims about titles, rights, or positions. There was no demand for an inheritance, respect, or an apology in public. The reason she gave was specific and very personal. Being aware of the truth and getting access to a complete medical background. She wanted to know the truth, not get paid. The way her claim was handled changed because of that restriction. In this story, officials couldn't write her off as greedy or careless. Her voice was steady. Be careful with your words. She talked less about who she was and more about being sure of things, about the need to know one's roots and what that means for health, history, and being honest. The timing of her arrival was very important. She came out at the same time as new court reviews of safeguards that have been put on hold in royal trusts. As soon as I stepped forward, something unseen changed.
How to ask things that were only abstract before became real right away.
It turned into a process. It became impossible to be quiet. Third clause, could not stay asleep, which had been thought of as a protection for a long time. The point wasn't to judge or blame, but to stop and check when questions about lineage came up. AM's claim, no matter what happened, set off that process just by existing.
The tragedy did not start the problem, accuracy did. One person, carrying using documents instead of requests, made a system that was based on tradition deal with uncertainty. If her claim would beat that point, whether it was proven or not wasn't important, the important thing was that the truth, whatever it was, had been officially invited to the party. After that, once the offer was sent, there was no way to go back to ignorance.
How AM came to be in the claim hasn't been clearly shown to be false, making Clause 3 applicable.
But will her claim go any further, please confirm? Or is the Queen just acting out of emotion? Could there be a past in Meghan's past that helps us understand her claim? Let's find out the facts. The taking apart the timeline.
As detectives in this made-up story rushed to put together from bits and pieces of the past, a disturbing timeline slowly came together. What came out, it wasn't one shocking event, but a series of small things that, when united, brought up important issues. At the heart of this made-up story rebuilding was the idea of a secret Catholic relationship and maybe short marriage between Meghan Markle and a guy named Joe Giuliano during the middle of the 1990s. For years, these charges had only been talked about in whispers. Now inside the story, they were being looked at as records that should be looked at. From this point of view, the partnership was said to have happened in a formative time before there was any royal link. What was really scary wasn't the romance itself, but what happened next. Investigators found references to a sealed annulment request that was sent to Catholic officials. Included inside in that request, there was a mention of a child who had not been baptized. If this is true in the imaginary setting, had both emotional and practical weight. Holy See documents that were thought to be rumors or mistakes were suddenly brought back into view. During the story, the records were looked over by archivists not for scandal but for truth. Though the church is known for being very careful with its processes, and even shut tombs leave clear paths. If checked based on these records, it looks like important parts of the person's past have been kept secret for decades. It wasn't about morals or personal decisions. It was a process. The royal systems depend on openness when screening, applying for immigration, and getting ready for a wedding. Omissions are just as important in the form of lies. Having a child, a past marriage, or being bound. People do not judge religion beliefs based on their feelings. They are judged by the law. Not giving them out is seen as a breach, even if you are not trying to do harm. Of steps to take. That difference became very important. The police were not looking for not out of shame, but to feel whole. Royal law says that silence can mean the same thing. The same effects as lying. The system thinks that all important past events are put on the table so that choices can be made with all the facts. Anything institutions that were built on clarity become less stable when less is added. The effects of this made-up story spread quickly. There were questions about both the past and the present. Going to the very core of authority itself. In the event that previous disclosures were not complete, later claims, it could change ties, especially those that have to do with family, titles, and inheritance. Once upon a time, the Sussex line was suddenly looked like they could be subject to formal review. What could be proven, but what had not been proved, scared officials the most. Looked at before. The order of events showed that the truth had not been hidden. Not behind lies but behind holes. And gaps need to be filled as soon as they are seen. Though the investigation did not find any evidence to support the charges, it stopped. It saw that even underground for a long time, when systems built for certainty run into unanswered questions, the past can come back to haunt them. And when questions are officially asked, tradition doesn't protect against the need for replies. The truth about Meghan Markle's past seems to match the story that the woman, which makes it seem right to use Clause 3. What could happen to Meghan because of this clause? What price could she finally pay? Let's find out. Fall apart on two fronts. As the kingdom changed tohat, people inside the company called Legacy Lockdown in secret, a careful effort to keep Hollywood began to quietly pull back to avoid too much attention and protect the next generation. But without a doubt, inside the house, each move was exact, well-planned, and well-measured. All mentions, projects, and money related to the Sussex branch were stopped by order of Prince William. They cut ties without a fuss but with clear power. Princess Anne stopped being kind. Events that the couple had together before, making sure there were no formal or informal ties stayed live. Princess Catherine took on the role of careful choice and judgment. Her public comments and appearances show a carefully planned silence that spoke louder than any word could. The message was clear.
There would be no problems with the monarchy system, and there would be no easy ways out, loopholes, or sidetrackers. For those across the Atlantic, however, the change played out in a less loud and more jumbled way. Meghan Markle's once powerful group of friends, Hollywood insiders, directors, and industry experts started to come apart almost imperceptibly at first. Tyler Perry, who has supported for a long time, used to back away from working with others. Other well-known friends slowly withdrew, some claiming scheduling issues and others citing the need for professional clarity. Projects that were being worked on stopped moving forward for no clear reason. Media sites put a hold on new releases and put plans on hold. What was once seen as strength, a strong declaration of independence and freedom, it looked more like being alone now, and a network of power was slowly dissipating. In this double orbit, judicial strategy was more important than controlling the story. At first, silence had protected against unwanted attention. But it turned into a more subtle risk. Without proactive contact or attempts to make peace gestures, an absence from public conversation left room for guesswork and growth not knowing. The strategy in Windsor was cautious but strict. Keep things going, follow the rules, and don't let distractions happen.
In Los Angeles, not having any friends and projects put pressure on each other without being said, showing how much it costs to split up in an industry driven by vision and forward motion.
In both situations, doors were shut, but not with drama or screaming. An act or show.
Instead, closures were quiet, thought out, and final. There were changes going on behind the scenes at the professional, social, and institutional gates. Sending a message that old channels of control that were thought to work properly no longer did. At this point, there was a big difference between having power and having personality. If you don't participate, your influence fades. Which is limited when you can't see what's going on. Controlled containment by the monarchy, Hollywood's quiet retreat, and an unsaid truth came together. When no matter how well planned, structures get stronger, links get weaker, and silence spreads, eventually leads to its own results. There was no denying the difference. One kingdom, one is a world of custom strengthened by discipline, and the other is a world of visibility slowly pulling away. And in the futures of both would not be shaped by words or comments, but by the weight of doors that are left shut. Sussex was linked, no longer could they use the person's references or assets, and their charity ties were cut off, allies pulled back because of what Meghan is said to have done. But what will happen to how is Harry in this case? Is the king going to save his son during this hard time? Let's look at Harry's decisions now, and King Charles made a rare order. The adding up. It was a disaster by January 18. Was at its most intense and most powerful level. Someone would remember that moment as a turning point in history of the ruling family. Prince Harry left Montevideo with a calm sense of purpose, going without a show or crew. He didn't have much with him besides court papers. Especially moving was the last will and testament of his mother, Princess Diana, is a heavy warning of both inheritance and what is expected of you. The unresolved issues are in those papers, which have been carefully kept for decades. Of love, heritage, and family. Threads that needed to be resolved inside Buckingham Palace. The air was thick with the stress that only comes from a system being pushed to its limits. King Charles used legal powers that aren't often used to bring dormant rules into effect. Meant to stop recognizing relatives whose claims were being questioned or weren't clear. There were mechanisms in place for hundreds of years, but they were never needed. Today, they could not be avoided. Officials in the palace moved very quickly and precisely. Letters and archives looked at, checked, and the right steps were taken. Every step was taken to make sure that both custom and stability and flow. Paul Burrell, Diana's longtime boyfriend, walked into this managed chaos. Stepped forward to give the last letter from the princess, which was sealed and signed. Due to her careful, with her moving words, Diana had been waiting for this moment to come. What her youngest son would do when he had to choose between love and duty. Her wisdom, written many years ago earlier, wasn't just an idea anymore. It was the truth. Long-term challenge from Arias hinted at in private letters, could no longer be avoided. The point were in terms of family duty, property, and telling the truth about yourself. In the late evening, everyone watched as King Charles spoke to the country. His words were serious, reasoned, and free of exaggeration. Not a single controversy was played up, do not take part in talk. But instead he talked about leadership, duty, and the need for clarity, saying that no property should be given without first being checked. No repair without being sure. Even though the speech was short, it had the weight of hundreds of years and served as a reminder that the monarchy doesn't live on individual to follow the law, keep traditions, and carefully handle the lineage, not because they want to. As the house lights went out, a single phrase could be heard whispered through the halls, which had been used by generations of royalty. Sometimes, to protect the crown, you must let go of the prince. It's not true. Not an attack, but an admission of the harsh facts that come with duty. At that very moment, the story of the fairy tale legacy of smooth succession came to mind. Through what came next wasn't a show, but a conclusion. A careful, a slow, painful process of checking and making a choice. There would be families, inheritance, and lines of succession. All be looked at with a fresh set of eyes. The government had to be clear and tell the truth at all times to stay alive. How hard it is. For Prince Harry, it wasn't clear what to do next. For the crown, it was clear what it meant. Now, history, law, and duty would set there would be no shortcuts in the story. It was time to start counting. What do you think? How do you feel about Harry's fortune being frozen because of what Meghan did? Could they both make it through this tough time? Weedy would love to know what you think in the space below. Remember to like and subscribe.